Max Verstappen has pretty much been the one to beat this season in Formula One, and with that, some other drivers stepping into the grid are also looking up to him for advice. One of these drivers seems to be Nyck de Vries, who got a motivational speech from Verstappen, and that was right before the reigning champion's terrific F1 debut in the Italian Grand Prix. So what did he talk about? Let's find out. First off, de Vries wasn't even gonna be here and got called at the last minute. That's right around a minute's notice, he came in to replace the unwell Alex Albon on the Saturday morning of the race weekend, and with that, he reached Q2 and lined up 8th on the grid for Williams, mostly because of a host of grid penalties affecting rivals. In fact, even though sanctions taking more than the permitted number of power units didn't really put de Vries ahead of Verstappen, at the same time, he definitely managed to line up alongside the world champion, who dropped from 2nd to 7th on the grid. So you know what it means. It was an all-Dutch 4th row, and both fellow countrymen were celebrating the race, and of course there was a lot to be proud of. First, the Red Bull driver took his 11th victory of the season and 5th in a row. At the same time, de Vries managed to score 2 points by finishing P9. Having said that, there's definitely a sort of bond that exists between the two drivers, and while de Vries is the elder one by 3 years, he's definitely the younger one when it comes to experience in the F1 grid. In fact, Verstappen's driven in 156 more F1 races and is almost certain to retain his driver's title. With that said, he's more than qualified to give the former F2 and Formula E champion a nice pep talk right before his bow in the Elite Series. Up next, here are the words of advice from the reigning champion. The media couldn't let a moment like this go, could they? So, right after the Italian national anthem, they spotted de Vries talking to Verstappen, and they just had to ask him during the post-race press conference about what he said to the Formula E champion. Here's a piece of advice. First of all, enjoy it, and don't think about it too much. Don't stress about it too much. Now, that's definitely something you'd want to hear right before a race when your nerves are all over the place. Adding to that, he said that he remembers his first ever race, and don't we all? It happened so quickly. Literally, everything just swept by before he knew it. With that said, he talked about how thinking that you just need to see what happens is probably better than really stressing out. You just need a good start and a good first lap to keep you going. Focus on it step by step instead of getting super overwhelmed and messing it up even more. What's more, Verstappen seemed to be pretty impressed with de Vries. It turns out Verstappen said that the Formula E champion handled it pretty well out there. And of course, they know each other really well, so a little quick motivation speech seems to be something that was needed right before the race. In fact, he called the Formula E champion's performance impressive, especially having spent virtually all of the race in a DRS train, and that's with McLaren's and Pierre Gasly's AlphaTauri right ahead of him, and Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu snapping at his heels in behind. Adding to that, Verstappen said that he saw him battling right then when he was defending 10th at the time, and of course for Nyck to just sort of jump right in there and deliver this kind of performance is not easy at all in any way. With that said, it seems like he did a pretty great job, also in terms of defending. Plus, he seemed to keep his cool and not let the pressure get to him. Clearly, that's probably why he didn't make any mistakes and made the reigning champion proud. And let's not forget, this was just his first race. Following up, this is pretty big for Nyck. Now, despite being a former F2 and Formula E champion, he hasn't ever been hired for an F1 race seat. Instead, he's been acting as a reserve for Mercedes while continuing to race elsewhere. Having said that, the Italian Grand Prix seemed to be the call he was waiting for. With Alex Albon ruled out of the race due to his appendicitis, the 27-year-old was already in the paddock. And then came race day, where de Vries did his chances of securing a permanent place on the grid absolutely no harm by finishing 9th. In fact, he was even named driver of the day, plus it was Williams' best result of the season so far, and even earned the Dutchman widespread praise from fans and his fellow racers. And gaining advice from the man who is all but certain to be crowned world champion, and that too for a second time in a row this year, was all Nyck needed. And to think of it, while it may seem sweet and simple, it was probably all he needed to hear. Not to mention, Nyck is probably going to replace Alpine-bound Gasly at AlphaTauri. Even though Colton Herta's potential move to AlphaTauri seems to be winding down, Gasly could still be off to Alpine. And now Nyck seems to be waiting in the wings to swap the Mercedes fold for Red Bull as the Frenchman's replacement. Adding to that, Red Bull appears to have accepted IndyCar racer Herta isn't going to get an FIA super license to get the final switch to Formula One, so clearly that deal seems to be off the cards. Although originally it seemed like his availability for AlphaTauri was a condition upon which Gasly was going to be released from the final year of his contract, and of course that was going to let him join Alpine after Fernando Alonso left the team to race for Aston Martin in the upcoming season. At the same time, Red Bull may let Gasly go. With that, de Vries is going to be the first in line to replace him at AlphaTauri. Now, it's fair to say that he's been linked with an F1 seat for the longest time, but recently it seems like his future is set with Williams, and it also seems like the performance also caught the eye of Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko, who met up with the 27-year-old in Austria. Moving on to other related news. First off, Lewis Hamilton is rattled by Verstappen as Horner talks about the rivalry. The two F1 drivers played out a pretty thrilling title battle in the 2021 season, and with that, this season seems pretty promising for Max as well. At the same time, the Red Bull team principal principal said that he seems to have a psychological advantage in his title battle with Hamilton last season, which left the Mercedes star rattled. In fact, the duo even played out one of the most memorable title fights in F1 history, colliding on track many other times and aiming thinly veiled digs at each other out of the cockpit. And the Silverstone was probably the most controversial battle, to say the least. Horner says the 7-time champion has everything to lose, so it's a much more stressful environment for him. At the same time, Max is a young kid who's out there taking risks and throwing everything at it because what does he have to lose? And it seems like all of this overtaking and pressure is starting to rattle Hamilton. Coming up, Daniel Ricciardo is ready to accept his F1 fate for 2023. It seems like he's accepted the idea of missing out on a Formula 1 race seat for the next season because he doesn't seem to have a lot of options anymore. In fact, the Australian was supposed to spend at least one more season with McLaren, but his contract was terminated a year earlier than planned, and that was right in the middle of his ongoing struggle for form and consistency. At this point, most of the seats on the grid are already taken, and with Williams setting their eyes on Nyck and Alpine looking elsewhere, he's only left with Haas as a real option. Having said that, there might not even be a vacancy on the American team because Gunther Steiner might as well stick with Mick Schumacher. So after the Italian Grand Prix, the 33-year-old admitted that he might not be on the grid next year, and he's okay with that. Obviously, this year has been challenging for him, but if he's on the grid, he wants to be able to enjoy it and feel like he can thrive, and so he's not going to jump into a car for the sake of it. Finally, Hamilton is extending his F1 career to help Mercedes overcome troubles. It seems like all the pressure has given the F1 driver fresh motivation to continue in Formula 1. Now, with less than 6 races left, the reigning Constructors' champion still has a race to win. Clearly, 2022 hasn't been easy for him, but he's still motivated to use the opportunity to win in the upcoming season. There were a lot of rumors around his retirement, with his contract ending in 2023 and potential replacements lining up. Having said that, Hamilton isn't ready to leave just yet. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about Verstappen's motivation speech for Nyck de Vries? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.